Good morning, everybody, and welcome to English with Jacky. My name's Jacky Brown, and if you're not one of my students, then I teach GCSE English, and I'm an examiner for 2 of the exam boards. Today I'm going to have a look at the AQA GCSE English Language question 4 from paper 1, the Explorations in Creative Reading and Writing. I'll be looking at the extract that was used for the November 2018 paper, which is A Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. And you'll find that on the AQA website, and you need to download the insert so that you can work closely with me as we go through the question. Okay, so let's have a look then at, let's begin and have a look at our assessment objectives. And the assessment objectives, as you know, are set by the exam board, and they are the skills really that you are required to demonstrate in order to get marks to pass the exam. So question 4 is A04, and this is to show your ability to evaluate text critically and support this with appropriate textual references. So a key term to learn there, we need to think about critically evaluate. Do we really understand what that is? So if you critically evaluate something, then what the examiner is asking you to do is to be able to read a text, read a piece of text, and ask you to look at it in a lot of detail, sort of like take it apart like a detective, and then weigh up the evidence to be able to provide your judgment or opinion about it. So that's what we need to be doing. And we do that, if you remember, by looking at writers' devices that they use to influence readers, if you like. So everything that you've been doing in the language analysis question and also the structural device analysis question. And nothing new here. Okay, let's have a look at the question. So the question will always ask you to look at a particular part of the source. So it will say, focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source from line 31 to the end. Now those line numbers might change depending on the extract that you are looking at. And what you need to do is, I've just popped that up there, take your highlighter pen and draw a box around line 31 to the end of the text. It's really important to remind ourselves that we need to use our highlighter pen. We need to use our pen as well so that we actually engage our hand with our eye, looking at the paper, writing things down. It helps to engage our brain. It helps to increase our understanding of the text. And just, you know, that physical engaging with the text is going to help us to be able to do a better job at answering the question. So make sure you highlight the section. If you were to give an answer from outside of the highlighted section, then it wouldn't matter how good it is, you're not going to get any marks. So really important. And it will say a student said, so it might say a teacher said or a student said, this part of the story where the men encounter the Tyrannosaurus Rex shows Eccles is right to panic. The monster is terrifying. Okay, so we need to think about the focus of our statement. So, and this is going to help us to make sure that we're answering the question. So highlight the focus of the question. So I leave you to have a look at that. Could you please highlight the focus? And if you have that correct, then you should be highlighting Eccles is right to panic because the monster is terrifying. And then it will ask you, to what extent do you agree? We always agree. I always recommend that you agree. Don't try and disagree unless you really are writing in a kind of like an A star, a grade 9 answer. Then you are going to you're going to find it quite difficult to get a grade. So then it will say, in your sense you could, in your response actually you must. Consider your own impression of Eccles' reaction to the Tyrannosaurus Rex and evaluate how the writer describes the monster. This is that critical evaluation that we've been talking about. So the writer will do that by using structure techniques or language techniques and to have an effect on you. And then the last thing you must do is support your response with references to the text. So that means giving evidence, like finding evidence in the text, having quotes embedded into your answer. 20 marks for this question. So you can allow yourself 25 minutes to answer. And if we have a look now at the assessment criteria, so I've put up for you the kind of like low. We know that it's 20 marks. We have got to be at the top of that sum or attempts to level. We need 10 marks. We need half the mark from every single question in order to get a grade 4 pass. So really, some attempts, you're going to be making some evaluative comments. Maybe you don't go into very much detail. So you attempt to evaluate or comment on the text. You do offer an example to explain your view. You attempt to comment on the writer's method. So maybe you won't get that right all the time, but you'll be trying to. And you'll be selecting some quotes. Right. Where we need to be really is clear and relevant. All right. So 11 to 15 marks ensures that we are well within our grade 4 pass. And that just means the difference between, instead of attempting to, clearly actually being able to explain your views clearly, clearly identify correctly writers' methods and say why and how those methods have been used to create an effect to prove the statement that Eccles is right to panic when he sees that monster. So that's our assessment criteria. So if we have a look, when the question asks you to evaluate a character, if you ever have a character, it's a really, really good idea to learn this acronym FAST. So think fast. Feelings, actions, speech, and thoughts. So think about our character. What method does the writer use to show us these things? So if you find some dialogue or speech in the text, mark it. What kind of method is that? It's dialogue, it's speech. We know that that's a structural technique. What do they reveal to you about the character? So think about the way the character interacts or what they say. What does it tell you about them? It might reveal how they are feeling. You need to identify the method. You need to provide evidence. So think about what quote or what words you could embed to show and prove what you now know about the character, how they're behaving, and you need to be able to evaluate that. So think about what effects do any of those things have on you as a reader, and how do any of these things help you to agree with the focus of the question, that linking back, always linking back to in our answer. Okay. So if we have a look now at the text. So I'm going to read the text to you. And while I read it, I want you to use your highlighter pen. You should have downloaded this text. If not, make sure you have a hard copy of it so that you can actually engage with it. And as I read the text, please carefully highlight anything that's important, anything you think is important that helps you agree with the focus of the question, that the monster is so terrifying that Eccles is right to panic. Okay, so let's give it a read. So Sound of Thunder from Ray Bradbury. It's from the middle of the story. It can't be killed, Eccles pronounced this verdict quietly, as if there could be no argument. He had weighed the evidence, and this was his considered opinion. The rifle in his hand seems like a toy gun. We were fools to come. This is impossible. Shut up, hissed Travis. Nightmare. Turn around, commanded Travis. Walk quietly to the machine. We'll remit half your fee. I didn't realise it would be this big, said Eccles. I miscalculated, that's all, and now I want out. It sees us. There's the red paint on its chest. The tyrant lizard raised itself. Its armoured flesh glittered like 1,000 green coins. The coins, crusted with slime, steamed. In the slime, tiny insects wriggled so that the entire body seemed to twitch and undulate. even while the monster itself did not move. It exhaled, and the stink of raw flesh blew down the wilderness. "Get me out of here," said Eccles. "It was never like this before. I was always sure I'd come through alive. I had good guides, good safaris, and safety. This time I figured wrong. I've met my match and admit it. This is too much for me to go on." "Don't run," said Lesperance. "Turn around. Hide in the machine." Yes, Eccles seemed to be numb. He looked at his feet as if trying to make the move. He gave a grunt of helplessness. "Eccles!" He took a few steps, blinking, shuffling. "No, not that way." The monster, at the first motion, lunged forward with a terrible scream. It covered 100 yards in 6 seconds. The rifles jerked up and blazed fire. A windstorm from the beast's mouth engulfed them in the stench of slime and old blood. The monster roared, teeth glittering with sun. The rifles cracked again, but their sound was lost in shriek and lizard thunder. The great level of the reptile's tail swung up, lashed sideways. Trees exploded in clouds of leaf and branch. The monster twitched its jeweler's hands down to fondle at the men, to twist them in half, to crush them like berries, to cram them into its teeth and its screaming throat. Its boulder stone eyes levelled with the men. They saw themselves mirrored. They fired at the metallic eyelids and the blazing black iris. Like a stone idol, like a mountain avalanche, Tyrannosaurus fell. Okay, so that is our piece of text. What I'd like you to do, hopefully you've been highlighting some anything that you focused your attention that really you could use to try and answer the question. Now I'd like you to just take a moment and see if you can identify the methods the writer has used, either language or structure. So just see if you can annotate your text, and I'll give you a couple of moments to do that. Okay, now we should be back and we can have a look at, we might have very different things, but they're, some things that I thought that I could use to help me to answer the question. So I've said it can't be killed. So you'll notice that I've highlighted that. And that, of course, is speech. It's what Eccles actually says. This was his considered opinion. I thought that was important because at that point, I think he's just starting to that's kind of like the start of it. He considers it. He's obviously quite knowledgeable. And then the writer uses this simile here. His hands seemed like a toy gun. So we can think about, so what effect would that have? If the writer is telling us and we're using that simile, then what does that suggest to us? How could we evaluate that point? I've also got the armored flesh. So armored being an adjective. To describe our monster. Think about armor and how difficult with your toy gun that might be to penetrate. The monster I've highlighted because it's no longer a T-Rex, it's actually become a monster, so a bit of a metaphor going on there. And then we have the sensory language, the stink of raw flesh blew down the wilderness. So again, a bit more speech, get me out of here, I've met my match and admit it. And then as we continue, we have Eccles' physical reactions. So we not only have what he actually says out loud, but we have something that he is able to show physically. Eccles seemed to be numb. So he looked at his feet as if trying to make them move, and he gave a grunt of helplessness. So, and also that blinking and shuffling. So verbs there, if you wanted to concentrate on those. The monster, as soon as he sees the move at first motion, lunged forward with a terrible scream. Again, you could use that as sensory language, or you could focus in on the verb lunged or the adjective terrible scream. And then again, I think that sensory language of smell, the beast's mouth engulfed them in the stench of slime and old blood. So think about What effect? What could you say? How would Eccles react if he can smell that old blood and slime coming at him from this monster and it's roaring? Uh, okay, so and then we have the terrifyingness of the monster, which it's got jeweler's hands and it fondles at the men, twists them in half, crushes them, crams them into his teeth. So we've got a bit of listing going on there to just really tell us how frightening the monster is. So what I'd like you to do before you have a look at the two student examples that I've given you is have a go at writing your own response. So 25 minutes, whatever you have highlighted, or use the bits of text that I've highlighted. Make sure that you're secure with the method, and then I'd like you to have a go at writing it up. When you're thinking of writing your answer, the first thing you must do overall is state your opinion, agree with the statement. Okay, make sure the examiner knows immediately that you have read the statement, understood what the focus is, and you're agreeing with it. And then when you make your first point, contextualize. When somebody does something and something happens in the text, then this happens. So provide some evidence from the text that proves your opinion, identifying the writer's method, what specific word may be, or structural device. It might be zooming in or zooming out as the writer used to help you to evaluate so that you can prove your point. And then remember to link back. How does this point prove the focus of the question? Really helpful. And here's just some sentence starters that you could use in that Peel sort of like structure. So first of all, I agree that the narrator is feeling either panic or anxiety. Try and choose some synonyms so you're not always repeating the word panic. You could put terror or whatever, trepidation. When the writer uses, so think about embedding your quote. So it could be a word or a phrase or a device. Think about zooming in, showing us some detail, a simile, verb, adjective, speech, anything that shows the fast, the feelings, the actions, the speech, or the thoughts. When Eccles is, say briefly where Eccles is, so it could be a narrator, it could be a character, is when this happens. Could have a for example, this suggests. So what does it suggest? This is your evaluation. This is your attempt at commenting. Try and make it as clear as you can. Does it show fear? Does it show a struggle? Is it terror? What is it showing? And then remember to link back every point you make to the focus of the question, which clearly shows that the narrator is feeling anxiety or whatever. Right, so you want to have a go at doing that. And if we have a look now, hopefully you have your response, and then this is student A. So I want you to have a look at student A and see if you can highlight, as we read this, the evidence, highlight where the student has made a point, a contextualized or said, introduce the writer's methods, and then highlight or underline where the student has evaluated. So we're going to try and mark this. So I agree with the statement that Eccles is right to feel panic because of the terrifying monster. When Eccles first sees it, the writer uses speech to show his reaction. He says it can't be killed because it's so huge. The writer then uses a simile to tell us that Eccles thinks his gun seemed like a toy, so it would be useless against the monster, and he wouldn't be able to kill it. This proves how frightened he must be at this point. When the writer describes the monster's armoured flesh and that its breath stinks of raw flesh, Eccles' reaction is shown through speech when he says, "Get me out of here." This shows he's in a panic and wants to run away. Okay, so really have a look. Can you identify the different parts of the answer? And when you have done that, you can have a look at one on the next slide, which I've done for you. So in yellow, I have marked the effect and the evaluative comments. The green shows the writer's methods. and we have the evidence. So we've got speech, show his reaction, it can't be killed because it's so huge. So that's our evaluative comment there. And then we have the writer uses a simile, that's a method. Tell us that Eccles thinks his gun, so what's it actually doing, seemed like a toy. Okay, and this proves how frightened he must be at this point. So just have a look at those. Have a look at the mark scheme. What do you think? How well has the student responded? So I'm going to give that a 6 to 10 marks. Probably give that about 7, I think. Some attempts. There's no real big evaluative comment in effect, but this student has made an attempt, definitely. And we do have some evidence, and we do have some understanding of writer's methods. Okay, so you could have a look at this point at your response and see how it matches up, or we could have a look at student B and see how they wrote. Right, student B then. I agree with the statement that Eccles is right to feel panic because the T-Rex is a terrifying monster. When Eccles first sees it, the writer uses speech to show his reaction. He says it can't be killed because it is described as having armoured flesh. The writer's use of the adjective armoured makes both the reader and Eccles realise that it would be near on impossible to kill. The writer then uses a simile to tell us that Eccles thinks his gun seemed like a toy, so it would be useless against the monster, and confirms he believes that he wouldn't be able to kill it, increasing his fear. When the writer describes the T-Rex's breath, which stinks of raw flesh, Eccles' reaction is shown through speech when he says, "Get me out of here." He is clearly panicking and wants to run away as he realizes the monster has just eaten meat and he might be next. The writer then shows us Eccles' physical response to the monster. Eccles seemed to be numb. He looked at his feet as if trying to make them move, and this confirms that Eccles is totally paralyzed with fear and is right to panic. Okay, so once again, can you find the examples? Are they relevant? Can you find where this student has contextualized the point? Is it clear? When he has written when the student has identified writer's language or methods or structural methods, are they quite clear? And is there a good evaluation? So let's have a look on the next slide where I've marked it up for you. And we can see there that we have everything color coded. So thinking about the marking scheme, I would say that that is clear. It is relevant because it answers and focuses on the question all the time. So the monster is terrifying and Eccles is right to panic. So I think that that deserves a 14, 15 marks. Okay, so I hope that you have enjoyed watching this tutorial and that it will help you answering your question 4s. And one thing I must remind you, please make sure time management is essential in this exam. You must leave yourself time to get to question 4. Question 4, 20 marks, half the mark of the first section, the reading comprehension section. So really, really important that you know exactly what you need to do to answer this question. Okay, thank you. Bye.